Thank you all for joining us for today's JMT and AvidXchange AP Technology Solutions for New Hybrid Workforce. My name is Lauren Hogan, and I'm a Regional Marketing Coordinator here at JMT, and we're very excited to have Mark Voigt from AvidXchange joining us today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before I turn it over to Mark. If you have any questions during the webinar today, please go ahead and submit them into the Q&A section as you think of them. We'll save all of them until the end of the presentation, but don't hesitate to submit them as they come. Also, just a reminder that we'll send you both some handouts and the recording of today's webinar within 24 hours after it has concluded. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mark.
Hey, thanks, Lauren. Good afternoon, everybody. We're certainly glad that you're here today and taking some time out of your busy day to join us all on this conversation. So I'm going to jump in. Lauren, did you have anything you wanted to cover here right out of the gate?
So here at JMT, we work solely with nonprofits. We're fortunate to partner with great softwares like AvidXchange. And we've been doing this for about 30 years now, which is really great.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I think you got most of this, right, in terms of housekeeping, when we're good there.
That's correct. Yeah. So we'll send the recording at the end of the webinar. Then also feel free to submit your Q&As as you think of them.
Perfect. Thanks, Lauren. As Lauren mentioned, my name is Mark Voigt. I am the Director of Sales here at AvidXchange. I am based out of Minneapolis. I'm actually, we're going to spend some time today talking about remote employees, and I'm actually one of those for Avid. AvidXchange, if you're not familiar, is based at headquarters out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We are a 21-year-old software company, celebrated our 20th year last year. We're kind of right in the midst of the pandemic kicking off, so a little bit of a different celebration for 20 years for sure. So, but let me start with a bit of an agenda. And an overview of what we're going to go through today. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about challenges that finance professionals are facing and really how that's evolved and changed over the last year to 18 months, of course, due to the pandemic. We're going to talk a little bit about what companies have done because of that, what solutions they're leveraging as part of this new hybrid workforce, as well as some of the other pieces that have bubbled up because of the pandemic. We're going to talk a little bit about the value of automating your accounts payable process. We'll spend some time giving you a small overview of how AvidXchange can help and how we're helping other customers. And we'll certainly spend some time at the end with Q&As. Keep in mind, I am not a technical expert. I'm happy to field some of those technical questions and know that if I don't have the direct answer to them, we'll certainly make sure that we follow up afterwards if there's something that's a little bit more technical that I'm unable to answer. So with that, let's start with this, a year of digital transformation. So obviously over the last 12 months since the onset of COVID-19, there's been some tremendous change in how businesses have been run and what they've been forced to do. So what we did is in conjunction with a third party, we did a survey of over 500 middle market businesses to really get a grasp and understand the financial and technological trends 1 year into the pandemic. And so we wanted to just give you some high-level overview of what's shifted in those businesses, how they're embracing technology, how they're leveraging technologies in new ways. And here's just a small snapshot of what we found out. So that first stat, 88% of companies have implemented new technologies in the last year to support cybersecurity, finance, and customer service. And we'll take a little bit more time here in a moment to dive into a portion of that. So our survey again found that 88% of those middle market businesses, which for us as we go through and categorize that, is companies with revenues of 5 million to about $1 billion, implemented some sort of new technology or solution. Nearly 2/3 of those, 64% of respondents now have the right technology to allow at least some of their employees to work from home. And that's a big jump it sat at about 37% in our survey last March. So just you can start to think through your own transformation of what this has happened and what sort of items you've had to put in place, what your own policies are, the challenges, et cetera, that you're facing as part of that transformation. So this increase just continues to stand, and we continue to see growth in it across the board. It's the most significant percentage up here is the change of in this survey's findings, and reinforcing how important it was for businesses to really make sure that their work from home employees were equipped properly with the right technology tools to continue to operate business and not get shut down. Unfortunately, we had a lot of conversations right in the middle of the pandemic last year where to some extent business was almost at a halt because people were not prepared for a work remotely environment. Now with all of these changes, and we've a lot of people leveraging technology similar to AvidXchange for in this area or other areas of their company, 77% of middle market businesses plan to allow at least some employees to work from home permanently, which again is a huge shift in the market. So what's causing people to not automate? So even though we've gone through this tremendous change over the last year, there's still, and your company might be one of these, that is still hesitant to adapt some of this technology. So for us, a couple of the biggest reasons we've got up here on the screen. The first one is just status quo. So we hear a lot that most of the businesses who've waited on implementing or are hesitant to jump into the new technologies said it really starts at the leadership level, and that the leaders within the organization were extremely comfortable with just that status quo, feeling like they have enough workarounds and are okay with what they're doing so far. Additionally, the second piece of this is that companies said their biggest challenge in the first year of the pandemic was just adjusting to the hybrid workforce. So there was a huge challenges there that they're still trying to overcome. And the last one is many businesses are still receiving invoices and payments via physical mail. And so these are huge, present huge challenges that businesses have to overcome as well, that have allowed them to, or force them to be hesitant to kind of jump into the technology component. So we're going to pause here just for a moment. We want to put up a quick poll for all of you to jump in and be a little bit interactive. So I'm going to ask Lauren to quickly assist with this if we could. We've got the poll up and it says, what is the current status of your company staff? The first option is all or most are working from home, all or most are working from the office, or we're really in a hybrid scenario where we're in kind of a combo platter of working from home and the office. So we'll give you a minute to respond and kind of share some of the results here. Lauren, do those results automatically show up?
Here, it looks like we have about everyone done, so I'll share those results right now.
Yeah, great. So it looks like we're in the, this is interesting. So we've got about half of you are hybrid and half are completely working from home. We don't have anybody that's completely working from the office yet. So really interesting. So I'm sure a lot of what we were just discussing in terms of challenges, et cetera, are all things that you've explored or been impacted by in the last year. So let's talk a little bit about what companies have been doing over the last year about implementing technology, the areas that they're really focusing on and finding the most impact in. So we're going to deep dive into a lot of these different areas here in the next couple minutes. And all of this really came out of that poll that I mentioned a minute ago of those 500 middle market companies. And really when we asked them what technologies they've invested in the past year to overcome any sort of challenge, these are the areas that they came up with. So there's enhanced cybersecurity, enhanced customer support capabilities, migration of assets to the cloud, remote communication software, and automation of accounts payable. So let's take a look at each one of these. So one of the interesting pieces that has come out of the pandemic is that we've really seen actually an increase in cybersecurity issues. So 77% of those companies seen an increase in the overall level of fraud during the pandemic, and 92% expect that to increase this year. So I won't go through all of these, but there's a number of ways that you can enhance your cybersecurity. One of the largest is including leverage cloud technology to secure your data, and make sure your organization is leveraging best in practices to identify red flags that help you manage through any of those fraud components. So this is a really big one that we've actually had a lot of customers come to us to talk about as they continue to work from home. So oddly, it's, you're hearing more and more cases, some things that we just don't think about in terms of fraud, where, you've got people working on home networks now. I'm doing that right now as we speak, working from my home network, not behind a corporate firewall. And so fraudsters know that, they're aware of that. And so they're taking full advantage of coming after home networks and seeing what sort of information they can gather. So this is a big area of concern for companies. The next one was improving customer support. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that in this sort of more remote environment that we're all sort of living in, that there's been a really enhanced focus on building stronger customer support capabilities, and especially in that scenario where we're in a hybrid work environment where it can make it a little bit more challenging. So a couple of things: enhanced capability companies have been involving and investing in things that include automation like chatbots, where you can leverage chatbots to provide really quick answers to queries by referencing against your organization's knowledge base. So that's been a big investment. And other investments include offering omni-channel support and remote support technology. So we've got a number of stats up here just about that customer support. And for better or worse, customers are really unforgiving, even in these trying times, to not speak out about a bad customer service experience that they've had. And we don't need to dwell on the fact that this can be extremely damaging to the organization of those continued bad customer services experiences. So a migration of assets to the cloud, it was another one that popped up of really an area of investment. So the increase in the cloud market in last year and into the first half of 2021 was heavily driven by COVID-19, and obviously that ability to work from anywhere, or that hybrid workforce. This is not a new concept by any stretch, of course, the idea of a cloud-based computing or cloud-based infrastructure, but obviously the big wins here is that accessibility of data, where it's stored in the cloud. It can really be accessed from anywhere, no matter what happens to your physical machinery. And they can access that data no matter where they're at, anywhere in the world, on any device. Integration plays a huge key here when you go to the cloud. So items like AvidXchange integrate with a number of different formats, but that accessibility becomes even better when it's a cloud-based platform that we're integrating with. And the last one is a segue off of what we just talked about, which is that enhanced security. So by storing, of course, all of your business information and data more centrally, the cloud offers much stronger security than what you would find in traditional data centers. And what you're seeing is that the majority of popular cloud providers now also offer many built-in securities like security analytics, periodic updates, and cross-enterprise visibility. So a huge component. All of these, of course, are best in class and are huge reasons why we've seen a large move in many areas to the cloud. The next one is remote communication software. So, as I was kind of thinking through these today and rereading the stats of that are up here on the screen, it just obviously reminds us all of how much more we're leveraging things like this, like we're in today: Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Skype, whatever you're leveraging, both on a personal and a perspective level. I think if we could all go back 18 months, we would know what we know now. We would all be investing heavily on the stock side in these technologies, because they've all just blown up and taken off. So this has been a huge piece of that adjustment to a hybrid workforce, or completely virtual in many cases, as several of you echoed in our last poll. So 46% miscommunication or lack of communication is a challenge for management in remote work. 49% of finance professionals invested in remote communication software to overcome key challenges. So a huge shift in this area as well. And the last one is our automated accounts payable, that we've seen a heavy shift in as well. So a number of areas, and really it covers a lot of what we just went through, that once you're able to automate and move away from a more manual AP process, there's several immediate, tangible opportunities that have an impact on ROI of implementing something like an electronic software, which is what cloud-based software like what AvidXchange provides. So you'll see that increased efficiency and flexibility where you can immediately see all of your invoices and payments while being able to access that data from anywhere, of course. That increased level of security that we just talked about when you move to the cloud. You're saving company money by really, in most cases, getting rid of paper checks, taking large amounts of time away from manual processes, and giving people time back in their day to work on more strategic items. And lastly, kind of an often forgotten one is just gain and improve supplier relationships, where you gain a dedicated team with a company like AvidXchange that can really assist and focus on those relationships that you may not be doing today. So we're going to jump in now to that AP process portion. So what I want to do is maybe give a high-level overview of what, in our conversations and talking to customers that are still in the more manual world, what their process might look like today. And so I'll you can kind of confirm in your head and kind of read along if this is what your typical AP process looks like if you're still in a mostly manual environment. So what it really starts with is you've got an invoice that comes in, and that could come in a number of formats, typically still today, which might be surprising, but we have a majority of the customers that we work with before automation, and even in some cases after automation, are dealing heavily with paper-driven invoices. So they might have the companies that we work with might have anywhere from 1 to, I was on a call last week that had 10 individuals opening invoices that were coming in via paper. So once that invoice is opened up, in some cases it's being attached or matched to a purchase order. Not everybody that we work with has purchase orders. In fact, the majority of the teams that we work with today, especially in the nonprofit areas, do not have those purchase orders. But again, once that invoice is opened up, it's routed then to some level of approval. So obviously a very difficult piece, especially if it's a paper invoice and we've got people working remotely. So how do you get that paper routed? Prior to COVID, you walked down the hall and you took it and put it on somebody's desk and they signed off on it. And a lot of companies are trying to figure that out and have had to adapt their process today. From there, it's routed, it's coded into your ERP. It's routed for those final approvals of, again, that same process of manually kind of passing it around, and how do we do that today? It's compared against some level of budget, right, to make sure that we've allocated enough for the budget and that this is a purchase that we did have budgeted appropriately. It's then manually keyed into your accounting system and posted to the GL, right, for that entry in. And then at some point, a physical check is cut out, which again, we're kind of jumping past that step. We're not spending a lot of time there, but this in a lot of the companies we speak with presents a heavy amount of pain only because of the number of checks that are present. Again, spoke with a customer about 2 weeks ago that said that they're jokingly kind of made the comment that her CFO is basically dealing with carpal tunnel from all of the checks that they have to sign on a weekly basis, given the process that it exists today. And then you've got that filing in many cases, you walk in and you just see these filing cabinets upon filing cabinets of invoices that are there to come back with. And then if need be, any level of research that needs to happen after the fact, right? So supplier calls and they're wondering what the status of that invoice is, or you go through an audit and you have to find where that invoice is. So tracking that down in those filing cabinets, et cetera, can all become very difficult. So again, I just want you to start to think through what your own process looks like. Is this pretty similar? Obviously, you might have 1 or 2 more steps in here. Think about the number of people that are involved at each one of these steps for you, and the amount of time that it takes to, for your invoices to go through this process. So sort of related to that, we're going to jump into another poll question. So this is something that might, as we talk to customers, oddly enough, not everybody has sort of spent a lot of time with this, but curious if you have an estimation on how many hours a day does your AP staff spend on that manual process. So it could be on any of those steps that I just went through, whether it's opening the mail, coding, chasing people down for approvals, handling vendor calls, assisting with payments, any one of those steps really that your AP staff has to assist with. How many hours a day do they spend on that now today as it stands in a manual process?
Okay, going to close the polling here.
Perfect. Thanks, Lauren.
And share results.
Perfect. So this is pretty typical, right in that kind of 2 to 6 hours a day on manual processes. So you just start to think about that over the span of a week and what that means, right? So we're spending, we're seeing anywhere between 10 and 24 hours a week with most of you of hours that are spent per week on this process. So when you start to think about the environment that we live in and companies trying to chase growth, companies trying to become more efficient, and what you could do if we regain, conservatively, if we gave you back half of that time, if we gave you back 5 to 10 hours a week, right? What your team could do with that and become more strategic as opposed to being focused on, manual processes like opening mail, keying in data entry, et cetera. So the next piece we want to do is just give you kind of a glimpse of when you work with AvidXchange, what it does. So you obviously saw the complex steps that happen in what a manual process looks like. And really once we move into a digitized process, an automated process via AvidXchange, we're down to really 3 steps. And it's coding. So again, just validating that coding as it comes across to make sure we're coded it correctly. We're pushed through an automated approval process with an entire audit trail that is trackable and traceable. And then finally that post to GL. And we're going to dive into each one of these a little bit more in the next couple of slides. But really, again, this is an entire simplification of your process. And again, start to think about the amount of time and energy that's removed from the day-to-day grind of your current process when you see what we're doing with a more automated process like AvidXchange. So AvidXchange itself offers 2 core products. One of these is that invoice automation. So think about that as sort of that front end of your process. And the second piece is payment processes. So our best-in-class companies that we've worked with over the last year to 18 months are implementing the full suite, that full invoice to pay solution, because of the integration of data that works better when we have the full platform in place, the stronger visibility, the stronger controls, et cetera. The ROI greatly increases when we have both pieces in place. But want you to make you aware that this is sort of 2 suites of products, and we're going to talk a little bit about both today. So we covered this a little bit a second ago, but again, here's that sort of routing of before automation and after automation, what we really have in terms of the processes. And the key stat that I want to call out here is that we're almost 2.5 times rate of straight through processing improvement. So just a considerable amount of time that's saved as you start to move through an automated process from that manual component. All of those elimination of steps down to just a couple and refocusing your team's energy on more strategic tasks. So a little bit of insight into the AvidXchange process, and we'll kind of walk you through each one of these steps. Invoices are submitted into AvidXchange really in 3 ways. So we can continue to use a number of areas. So one of those is emails. So we would have and work with your team during implementation and activation to let your suppliers know that you will now have a designated email address that they would be sending your invoices to. So that's the first piece. The second is we would have, you can scan your invoices in. So you're seeing that via the upload method. And you can continue to work with us. We can have a designated lockbox where we would actually gather and scan your systems in on a daily basis, or excuse me, scan your invoices into the system on a daily basis for you. So once AvidXchange receives that invoice, we're going to, via a combination of both OCR technology as well as some level of human intervention, really extract all the header and detail information around the invoice, could include a PO number if that's part of your process, and submit your invoice into Avid Invoice. This would then trigger a approval workflow that you can customize out depending on the data that within the invoice. So some of our customers want to do that strictly by department. Some of them will do it based off of the dollar value of the invoice. So could be a number of different things that trigger that workflow that you're looking for. All sorts of predefined rules, conditions, logic, etc. So a number of different ways to work through that. So that's a little bit of the Avid Invoice. I know that's a super high level, and if you have a chance to follow up with us and go through a live demo or deeper dive conversation, we're happy to get into that more and show you, get into depth of how it would look as it relates to your process, but wanted to just give you that quick high level. The other portion that we mentioned was Avid Pay. So this is our assisting in the leveraging the payments or converting your payments away from check and into a more digital format whenever possible for a number of reasons. So there's a couple of things that people will choose AvidXchange for in terms of payments. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but right now we've got over 680,000 suppliers in our Avid Pay Network. So what we typically find when we start to work with customers, we do a comparison of your vendors as part of our process to our Avid Pay Network. And right out of the gate, we come to find that in most cases, we're working with somewhere between 25 and 35% of your vendors already as part of our network through another customer. So what does that mean? It means we know how they want to be paid. You might be paying them via check today, but because we've worked with them with maybe 1, 2, 5, 100 other customers, we know under what condition they might be willing to take, an ACH, or they might be willing to take a virtual card, which again, transitions you away from that manual process of check and allows you to start to leverage, in some cases, a rebate format to start to move you into more profitability from an AP perspective. We've got, right now we've got 300,000 e-payment suppliers enrolled. So, a tremendous amount of our vendors are already receiving that. We have a strong partnership with MasterCard, just as a backing of, in full transparency, of AvidXchange. So just tremendous partners. 40% average e-payment adoption, which is industry leading in terms of transitioning, again, people away from that check-based process. So a quick insight into the Avid network, how the Avid Pay network, of how it works. So again, this is best in class, is that we would be attached to Avid Invoice. So accounting system, generates those payments. The payment data then moves into Avid Pay and triggers that process to begin. There's then this Avid Pay control, right? That is set in there as really the final approval. So, there's one piece we get feedback on is, hey, I'd really, my CFO or my CEO really loves to sign physical checks because they have that level of control and they know what's happening through that process, right? Well, the fact of the matter is, with something like Avid Pay, you have even more control and visibility than you would with a physical check. So that Avid Pay control is, again, just that final level of approval of which of these payments we want to distribute. So money is going to then be pulled from your bank account. And then there are 3 ways really that the supplier can get paid. And we'll go into a little bit more of this on the next slide, but those 3 ways are the MasterCard, or what we call a virtual card payment. We can leverage an ACH style payment that we call Avid Pay Direct. And then of course, absolute worst case, if the customer really still just wants a check for whatever reason, we're going to cut them that check. Okay. On top of that, and at the end of that is of course that reconciliation. That you'll have higher levels of reconciliation from all of these digital transactions. The other piece that surrounds this at AvidXchange, you've maybe heard the term when you talk about software, you've maybe heard the term SaaS or software as a service. We like to talk at AvidXchange that we're a software surrounded by services. So we have a group in our Charlotte office of about 400 employees that all they do is they're a service team that works on your behalf for a number of reasons. One is to try to transition people away from check to one of those more digital forms of payment, but they're also just following up in general on POP processes and helping, and just improve the overall flow here, make sure that those suppliers that you're dealing with are happy. And again, this is a great benefit of working with AvidXchange because in most cases, as we talk to companies, they don't or haven't taken the time to really be able to focus on this. So after automation, what do we hear or what do we recognize from people? They've got a more streamlined process and approval, centralized location of all their invoices in terms of visibility, increased visibility in your invoice and payment data, accurate reporting with that click of a button that as you go through and you've got all of that data centralized, the audit trails that exists, you can, all of that is at your fingertips. And, perhaps most importantly, increased fraud protection. The other piece that's not necessarily visible here that we didn't list as one of those core pieces after automation is really the ROI of this process. So this is something that we can start to go through with you in terms of our process as we become engaged and start to learn a little bit more about what you're working on, why this is important, what your processes are today, what your biggest pains are, et cetera, is where we're going to be able to really impact that ROI. Some of that is strictly in human hours, right? How many human hours are we going to be able to sort of reduce and allow you to focus that energy on other projects? There's obviously dollars attached to that. There's also just some physical components. Like if the average cost of getting a check issued today is somewhere around the $9 to $14 range, depending on what you're doing. And if we're eliminating those checks, there's all sorts of ROI attached to that. And the last piece is really that transition to a digital form of payment. The two digital forms of payment that I mentioned on that last slide of Avid Pay Direct, our ACH, our enhanced ACH service, as well as virtual card payments that have a rebate form attached to them, right? So as we work on your behalf, part of what we're doing is, of course, there's just like there would be for a credit card payment, there's a fee attached to that for that vendor. We're going to share a portion of that back to you as a customer in the form of a rebate. So, in some cases, we work with customers where their rebate potential off of the transition to those digital payments or virtual card payments pays for a large portion, and in some cases, all of the AvidXchange platform. So that's another huge chunk focused on the ROI. So those, aside from the items we have on the screen, that ROI impact is another big one that we often see and talk with customers about as we go through their process. So really that's, we walked through a lot and maybe went a little quick on a few areas. So I want to make sure we pause and Lauren, I'll take your guidance. I haven't necessarily been watching the chat. If there is some questions that have popped up that I can try to answer, or at least more technical if I have to get back to somebody.
Yeah, it looks like we do have some questions. The first one is, can I still print checks with automation?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always a need, right? So depending on your industry or whatever, you can absolutely still print checks. Even if you're leveraging AvidXchange, we have some customers that still have that need. If somebody walks in the door and my vendor walks in the door today and I need to do an emergency check run, there's still that ability. And again, we can kind of show you that in a more personalized demo of how that gets categorized or marked in the Avid system. But yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then our next one is, how much does this cost? Is there a limit to the number of users?
So AvidXchange is not user-based, which is again a big separation from our customer, or excuse me, from some of our other competitors. It's more volume-based, and so it really depends on the volumes. But the average, cost in terms of the average cost is based around volumes. So again, we're basically charging you per invoice that we would process for you on a monthly basis, as well as the how many payments we're processing as well. So our rough cost is around $1.50 per invoice and about 89 cents per payment, no matter the format of that payment. So whether it's a check, that Avid Pay Direct format, or if we're leveraging that virtual card, it's 89 cents.
Okay, and the next one is, do we have the ability to set up workflows with specific approvers for different types of invoices?
Yes. So we definitely see that dependent upon department, or, hey, any invoice over $1,000 or $5,000 needs to go through a different workflow than an invoice that's $50. So we can definitely customize that out based on different workflows.
Okay, looks like the last one that we have over here, we have another one. Can you elaborate the front end process and details on how information gets transferred to the AvidXchange system?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we'll consume that invoice in any format that it comes in. So we're still seeing invoices that come via paper, via snail mail. We're getting some that are electronic. So if it's emailed, again, if it's a digital invoice, we're setting up an inbox where your vendors would just send it directly to that. We're then pulling that in and again, using a combination within AvidXchange of both OCR technology. And then on the back, no matter what anybody tells you competitively, no matter what they say their software will do, what their software will do, there's nobody in the market today that has 100% accuracy on OCR. It just doesn't exist. The technology is not there yet. So we are leveraging on top of the OCR technology, we're leveraging a combination of that as well as human intervention that are actually going in and validating what we pulled from the header, what we pulled from those information and pulled into the AvidXchange platform to reach extreme high levels of accuracy. And so again, once that information is populated into the platform, that's what then triggers the approval workflows based off of information that you've established in in the implementation process. So as an invoice comes in and it goes through that OCR/human intervention. If it's a marketing invoice based off of the department code, that's going to trigger a certain workflow if that's how you have it established. So hopefully that answers that question.
We have another one here. I'm assuming auditors are okay with this process.
Yeah, 100%. So the good part is you can allow like a read-only access to auditors so that as you're going through that, they can actually come in and see those audit trails. Every step of the process has a digital audit trail to it. So they can see when it came in, who it was with, how long it was with that individual, et cetera. So they can see the front end to back end process through a whole audit trail that exists on every invoice.
Okay, and another one here. How easy is it to get others outside of AP to use it, especially the approval process?
Yeah, that happens all the time, right? So again, that's one of the benefits of us not being user-based. If you're a company of 500 individuals, and at some point somebody through all of that is going to have to, every person is going to have to be able to touch an invoice maybe at some point. We're not user-based. So we don't necessarily, from the AvidXchange side, we're really agnostic to from a user perspective. So whether you're in AP or you're in HR or you're in sales, you can, the access is granted. Now, that being said, there are user permissions, of course, right? So all of that is set up at the user level of somebody in sales probably doesn't need obviously the same access or same rights and role and responsibilities as somebody that is works as an AP clerk.
Okay, another one we have here. How does accounting info get coded to payments?
How does accounting info get coded to payments? Whoever asked that, if you would mind just elaborating a little bit more, I want to make sure I understand and answer correctly.
Just waiting on a response.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to make sure I answer correctly. The short answer, if I understand it correctly, is that there is, as you push an invoice through the approval process, all of that information, and then once it's approved and it's into your GL structure, you're actually choosing which one of those approved invoices you want to push back into Avid Pay for payment. And all of that detailed invoice information is attached to the payment. So we are the reconciliation. There's a high level of reconciliation data that goes along with that payment, so that you can reconcile that this payment is attached to this invoice. All of that is stored in the system, so you can see that. I'm not sure if that's what you were asking or not.
So I still haven't heard back. However, we did have another question come through while we wait. How do we get a customized demo?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of ways you can do that. You can contact JMT directly. We've got a great partnership with them. You can also reach out directly to AvidXchange. Either way, either one of those is fine. And I think we'll actually be providing some of that information here at the end, right, Lauren, in terms of follow-up of how they can reach out and get a customized demo.
That's correct, yes. I'll be doing follow-ups as well. We can definitely get some sort of meeting set up with our team at AvidXchange and have that demo done for you.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. So it doesn't look like we've heard back yet, but I can definitely, Jay Wu, I can connect you with Mark possibly.
Yes, happy to do that.
Yeah, we can just elaborate some more on that question. Let's see, we had another Q&A chat come through. Here we go. My question is, how do vendor payments get accounting general ledger information coded into QuickBooks?
Can you read it one more time, Lauren? I'm sorry.
Yeah. How do vendor payments get accounting general ledger information coded into QuickBooks?
Yeah, okay. Again, I think that's the direction I was headed before, but once the invoice is approved, all of that information is going to be attached. And with QuickBooks specifically, it's one of the ERPs that we have an extremely strong integration with. And so there's direct communication between AvidXchange and QuickBooks via an API integration that's going to directly exchange the invoice information into QuickBooks, as well as any of that payment information back into QuickBooks as it happens. So if I understood that correctly. So all of that happens, and that's something that you can work with implementation on the frequency of how often that sync happens. But it is a setup that where that information is exchanged between Avid and QuickBooks as the process happens.
Okay, great. It looks like that's the end of our questions then. And Mark, if you don't mind pulling up that last slide. Yeah, so in regards to follow-up, if you're ready to chat more about how your organization can leverage AvidXchange to automate your AP, we'd love to help facilitate that. So for anyone that books a consultation by the end of the day this Friday, April 30th, tomorrow, I will send you a $10 Starbucks gift card so you can enjoy a cup of coffee on us while we chat. Visit jmtconsulting.com/book to get started. And as I said earlier as well, we'll also follow up with you either later today or tomorrow. And we look forward to connecting with you. So thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you so much, Mark, for your presentation. We always love having y'all host our webinars for us. So
yeah,
have a good rest of your day.